Welcome to the comeback season, where we have real conversations about fueling your body, rebuilding strength, and stepping back into the life you were meant to live. Whether you've been caring for kids, aging parents, or just lost sight of your own needs, we see you. And this is your season to rise. Hello, my name is Nichole McLeod with Healthy Mind, Healthy Body. I'm a mindset and fitness coach and the author of I Started on a Tuesday. I know what it feels like to lose yourself in the chaos and still hold on to the hope that something better is coming.
And I'm Christy Kelsey from Christy Counts Macros, nutrition and mindset coach and food freedom advocate. I've worked with lots of women who felt stuck, restricted, and unsure where to even begin. Together, we're bringing you honest conversations, healing truths, and real strategies to help you rise again, physically, mentally, and emotionally, whether you've hit rock bottom or you're just tired of putting yourself last. This space is for you because this is your comeback season, and it starts right now.
Welcome back to the comeback season, the place where we get real about the setbacks, the struggles, and the sacred moments of starting over again. Hello, I'm Nichole, I'm your host, and I believe with my whole heart that no matter what chapter in life you're in, your story isn't over. You are worthy of a comeback, and not just any comeback, the kind that leaves you stronger, freer, and more on fire for your life than ever before. Today, I am so excited, and I am joined by someone who knows all about what it means to pivot with purpose. Kellie Grutko is the founder of Purposeful Pivot, a platform dedicated to helping women navigate the big transitions of midlife with courage, clarity, and intention. Kellie's story is one of listening to that inner whisper that says, there has to be more, and daring to follow it. She's passionate about showing women that what many call a midlife crisis is actually a midlife calling, and an invitation, let's call it, to rise, rediscover yourself, and step into a season of deeper alignment and joy. I am so excited to dive into this conversation because, oh my goodness, it hits home for me with her because she embodies the heart of what the show is all about. And that's turning setbacks and shifts into sacred comebacks. Kellie, welcome to the comeback season. Let's first start off by you telling us a little bit about yourself and how you got in this purpose with the pivot.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. Yeah. So just, a little bit about myself. I live out just outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm originally a girl from the town of Erie, Pennsylvania, so I'm a far away from home. But I've been an executive marketer my whole career until I made my pivot, which I know we'll go into in a little bit. But yeah, and so I've been working my way here trying to help other women in this stage of life. So I look forward to talking to you.
And there are going to be a lot of listeners that are this is going to really hit home for, because as we were just talking before we pressed record, this is something that more of us need to talk about. It's something that, changes the way that we do life. So
Yeah.
I love how you actually call it a pivot, because midlife isn't the crisis or a crisis. It's more of like redirecting your calling, that invitation to want more meaning, more alignment. So let's just dive in. Why do you think so many women reach this point where they feel this tug of something new and to not know what to do with it?
Yeah, I think, a lot of people they do look at it. They're like, "Oh my gosh, it's a midlife crisis." But really, it's not. It is a crossroads. And lately I've been geeking out on all kinds of neuroscience podcasts and books, so forgive me, but I've been doing research on it, and it really is. It's not emotional, it's biological at this stage of life. Our brains are meant to learn, and we look back at all the experience that we've built up. I mean, you look back over how many years and all the experiences you've had, and now it comes to the point where you want to grow from that experience and not just use the experience like you always had, but actually grow from it and have an impact in life. So I think you get to this point where you've just kind of climbed a ladder, whether it's a corporation or some other profession, or maybe you were a head of a household and your kids are now gone, whatever your title. maybe it just doesn't suit you anymore. So I feel like, at this stage, women are trying to redefine what success looks like for them.
You just said it, and that really was what happened to me. I going through the motions of life, doing all the things, raising the kids, this, doing all of life.
Yeah.
And then you come to a crossroads and you're like, wait a second, do I want to be here? Where am I going? What's my next step? It's
Yeah.
this, and then you start questioning
Right.
what your goals have been and where you want to see yourself. And it creates so much turmoil, and then you become the
Mhm.
overthinker that's just trying to make
Right.
sense of it. And our predicting brains, we both know, study neuroscience, it's what our brains do. So what do you find that most women struggle with the most when they come to this wall, call it?
Yeah, yeah, right. Well, I think a lot of women, and I've talked to a lot of women about this. That's the whole reason I kind of got into this work, is because I've just found that there's such a need.
Mhm.
But most women, have a tough time with preparing their mindset and really just opening it up and being open to new ideas and not doing the same thing they've been doing for 30 years. I know personally, I was in marketing for over 30 years. And every time I thought about pivoting or making a transition, I just had marketing on the brain. And
Yeah.
like, it wasn't until I took those blinders off that new ideas came to pass. And then I think another big thing for women is identity. If I'm not this title, who am I?
Yeah.
And they start to feel invisible, and they wonder, if they'll be as important or have an impact. And so I think the biggest struggle really is that kind of identity finding and trying to figure out who you're going to be in this next stage of life.
And what successful means to you. Like we have these expectations that we hold ourselves accountable to. And when
Yeah,
they don't work out the way we hoped, because let's be honest, life doesn't usually do that anyway, we
right.
have this different idea of what successful means. And so how do you navigate people through that when, okay, now this is going to look different for me. I need to change my goals essentially.
Yeah, right. And that's so true, that I'm glad you said that, because I was looking at a study the other day and it said 80% of women 45 plus are trying to redefine what success means to them. So think about that. 80% of women in our age group are trying to redefine success. So, I have a framework that I work with women on. It's a process I went through. I pivoted my career from marketing to now transition coach. And so I didn't know I was going through this process at the time, but when I look back, I kind of put it on paper. And it did start with really preparing the mindset first, so first and foremost.
Mhm.
And then it was really identity exploration. Who do you want to be? Take the blinders off, and if you could be anybody and do anything, what would that be? And then once you kind of do that, then you start to vision craft your future, and what could it look like, and what kind of people do I want to be surrounded by? What do I want my day to look like? And you start to go through all that envisioning, and then really, once you start to get an idea, then it's opportunity mapping. Is this going to work? You do some research. Is it viable? Can I make a living off of this? And then once you kind of get through that, then you just create, then you tailor your path. So there is a formula. Everybody, goes through it differently. Some people don't need to go through every stage of this. I know I went through every one of those stages.
As you're
Um,
speaking, it actually is validating things for me. I'm like,
yeah,
yes, yes.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah,
I took more time in certain ones of those, but yeah, for sure,
yeah.
for sure.
The hardest part for me was we get this false sense in our head of what we want, like I just mentioned. But then you get to a point where you're like, what do I really want? And
Mhm.
for me, that step that I was putting a lot of pressure on myself because I really didn't know. So taking time in that first phase and giving yourself grace to try to understand who you were before kids, who you were before the career, what did you want? And then believe that it's the direction that you want to go. Because if we're having this false sense on autopilot, let's be
Yeah,
honest, so much of our life was autopilot. We
yeah,
did it without even thinking about it. And then you get to a point in that crossroad where you're like, hey, I'm done living on autopilot, but I've lived on autopilot for so darn long. I don't know what I want anymore. So, what
yeah.
are some strategies that you give people at the very beginning? Like, what can they do to really sit back and evaluate, what do I want?
Yeah, I mean, it tends to be really just a lot of introspection. I mean, you really have to take time to look inside and see what's important to you. I like to ask questions, like what parts of my life are no longer aligned with who I am? Or maybe it's what dreams or passions did I kind of leave behind? I put on a shelf, I forgot about them.
Mhm.
And think through some of that. And then a hard one is kind of thinking about, take the people out of your life, take the finances out of your life, take all those barriers out. And if it's just you with a clean slate and you could be anything, what would it be? So
Ooh.
it's hard, right? Because you got to, but it's an exercise, right? It's not
Mhm.
reality. It's an exercise of taking all of the barriers away. And that just frees up your mind to give you space to really think about what's important to you. And oftentimes you look back at, your job or whatever and find part of it that you really enjoyed, and then make a list of things you didn't enjoy, and start to compare. And I think slowly but surely you can see some themes about what really lights you up in life. And so I know for me personally, it took me a long time. I looked back on a dream I had when I was maybe 15 years younger, that I had just shelved, and I just totally forgot about it. One day I was talking to a friend, it came up, and that became my, I don't know, light in the dark, I guess. And I just kind of tweaked it until I got to where I am. So I think looking back at some of those things you might have forgotten about is a big step.
And I think a big part of that is being intentional about it
Mhm.
and making the effort to do it, and not don't think it's just going to come naturally for you. Because if
Mhm.
we realize it or not,
Right.
we've created these titles in our head of who we are, and
Yeah,
we've rode with those for so long, and that has been part of our autopilot, in my opinion. So
exactly.
let's talk about that. And you brought that up just now too. How do we how do we deal with these new titles coming our way, and releasing the old ones? Like if you're a mom, you're always going to be a mom, but you definitely have a different role
Right.
as a wife. And how, as life changes, what are
Mhm.
the best strategies that we can use to realign with these titles that we've given ourselves?
Yeah, I think, first of all, it's being courageous to take these steps and acknowledge that you're willing to pivot.
Yeah.
And then it's really, trying things that you like. That phrase, think, feel, do. I kind of like think, feel, try it on and do. So maybe it's you think of a small change, or, maybe it's in your professional life or personal, whatever it is. Think of something small. And then you think about, okay, once that change happens, how do I feel? Is my body lighter? Is there a weight off my shoulders? Am I energized? What am I feeling now that I'm on the other side of that change? And then I think you try it on. Maybe it's, if you want to do something new or be someone new, try it on. Take a class or volunteer. Or maybe it's, I don't know, following an influencer on social media that is doing something cool that you think you might enjoy. Try it on a little bit. And then, that gets you kind of to the do part. I think a lot of things come down to habits, right? If you want to, like you said, you want to be intentional. So if you create some habits on how to make these small changes and you do it consistently, you'll start to see change happen. I was actually coaching a woman who was a retired teacher, and she was trying everything, and because she just didn't want to be invisible. And then finally she got really overwhelmed, and we brought her back to what she really enjoyed, which was writing. And so she started on that habit loop, right? There was a cue, it was 7 o'clock. That was her cue to write. And she would just write anything just to get it down. And then, as time went by and I looked, and she had written all these articles. And I said, look at you, you are a writer now. So, I think if you do these small things a little bit at a time and consistently, that will get you to where you want to be.
So funny you say that, because I actually wrote down the steps that I've taken on my journey as a trainer, as a fitness
Mhm.
coach, and I did put a lot of pressure on myself. I'm a motivator. I'm a coach. I this is my job for other people, but I just couldn't motivate myself. I couldn't
Yeah.
find myself, and I got to a point where I looked in a mirror and I didn't even know who I saw. I know that sounds silly.
Mm-mm.
And I thought to myself, well, the only thing honestly I could think of doing, and this was before I started studying the neuroscience and the somatic training, which I'm also doing as well, to realize that you got to get those thoughts out. And
Mhm.
journaling, I have journaled most of my life on and off, but not
Mhm.
intentionally with a purpose.
Yeah.
And that was the small change that I personally started with. And it allowed me to have that quantitative data that I could look back and say, okay, well, this day this happened and this was my mindset. This day this happened. Hey, we both also know that our brain emotional regulation starts with the ability to bounce in between your parasympathetic and your sympathetic and the ability to do that. So identifying where those blow-ups happen and why started for me in journaling, and then the small changes. Like as a trainer, I know, you need to make small lifestyle changes in order to have them stick. Your brain is listening. So every time
Mhm.
you don't follow through on what you promised yourself, that mid-cingulate cortex, that part of your brain is going to get smaller. So if you strengthen it, and the way you can strengthen it is to be successful in those small habits. So I may
Yeah.
not be on the right path with what you coach, but that for me personally really
Yeah.
helped. Can we break that down a little bit as to why that may have helped me for our listeners?
Well, like you said, I think journaling is great once you get it out. For me, is a lot of listening to podcasts and reading books. I think the more you do something and over and over again, the more your brain understands it. So, there's all these neurons in your brain talking to each other. It's how you function every day.
Mhm.
And the more you do something and learn, the more the path becomes clear, right? Like if you're walking on a trail out in the woods and you walk on the same path over and over, it gets tamped down and it's easier to walk on. Same thing with your brain. If you're learning something new or thinking these positive thoughts and manifesting things, it becomes easier and easier to make them actually happen. So I think the act of, like you said, journaling or, listening to podcasts or reading books about things that interest you and you start to learn, that helps you manifest it in your brain to the point where you can actually start to make those changes. But again, it's consistency. You can't just do it, once and think it's going to happen. You
Yes.
gotta stay at it.
And the intentionalness of that, but our brains like to predict what's going to
Mhm.
happen for our
Mhm.
safety. That's where our brains will always go back to safety.
Yep.
But they're
Right.
not always right when they predict, as we both know. So
Mhm.
for me personally, and I don't know if there's some additions you can say to this to help our listeners, but even if I don't believe the thought, the thing, and I'm just being totally transparent here, I will still say it. If
Mhm.
I know that I'm having a pity party moment or I'm having my adult temper tantrum, whatever we want to call it, because we all have them, if I know what I should be feeling in that moment, and I will focus on that,
Mhm.
because we can trick our brain into believing the thing.
Yep.
And so what are some strategies that, if while we're in this messy middle of trying to redefine ourselves with all these new titles,
Yeah.
the imposter syndrome and all the things that start coming in play, what are a couple strategies that someone could use in that moment to calm down that brain a bit?
Yeah, I think, it can be little things. I mean, it could be, I had stickies, I'm a big believer in stickies. I have like sticky notes on my computer saying, this is who you are, you can do this. Or, maybe you put a note on your mirror and so you see it every morning. I feel like the more you surround yourself with images or thoughts or sayings of who you want to be, that slowly but surely is who you become. So the more you believe in something and the more you manifest it over and over again, it's going to happen. But like you said, it's got to be thoughtful. There's some days you're not going to believe it. That's okay. You just need to go and get back on that positive thought process and you will get there. And I think too, knowing that you're not alone, that there's so many of us in the same position. I mean, I can't even begin to tell you how many women I've talked to that are feeling the same way.
Mhm.
So I think knowing you're not alone in these feelings and knowing that they aren't just emotional and it's, oh, it's menopause or it's a midlife crisis. It really is a neurological change that happens in our brains. I think that all of these positive thoughts helps get you through it. So it's just making sure that, you stay positive even when it's hard,
Yeah.
and you'll find your way. You definitely will.
Neuroplasticity is a real thing. Thank
Yeah.
goodness for that.
Yeah. Who knew I'd be like geeking out on all the neuroplasticity podcasts lately, but it's fascinating.
You know what? This might sound silly, but when I got started hitting menopause full throttle, the only thing that I could think of to do was to start studying what was going on in my
Yeah,
brain. And
right.
it has opened up so much. And the podcasts and the available information that we can listen to now to help
Mhm.
validate that we're not going crazy. It's just a natural phase in life that we
Yeah,
have a choice to show up
right.
for or not show up for. And it doesn't just go away for the listeners that think it'll just go away. You can make
Yeah.
it easier.
And I love that you use the word choice because I was thinking about that the other day. You when you look back, sometimes we're so focused on looking forward that we forget. You can look back and think, look at all I have done over all of
Yeah.
these years. I've worked so hard to get where I am today. I deserve to make a choice now to what my next stage is going to be. So you've earned this opportunity to make a choice. And so be free and know that it's your time to do that. And I think that's powerful.
I love that.
Mhm.
And once you get past the what's the word I'm looking for? Once you get past the roadblock of realizing that your life is changing, your kids have grown, whatever it may be,
Mhm.
and you get excited about the next step. I felt that there was for so long there, I was almost mourning my old self. Oh
Yeah.
man, to have the confidence that 25-year-old Nichole had. Oh, I
Yeah.
knew everything back then.
Oh, yeah.
And then you hit your 50s and you're like, I don't know anything.
Yeah.
Right? But the wake up call, the reality to it, and then to be content with it. And the
Mhm.
moment that you're like, okay, you know what? I'm not mourning. That was a time in my life and these things
Mhm.
happened and we're in a new chapter and then get excited about it and all the opportunities. So that's personally what I did and it's helped and I'm definitely still on my journey. I'm not even closely there and I
Yeah.
feel we all are and then that's why honestly I'm doing what I'm doing with the comeback season.
Yeah.
But let's talk about for you personally. What were some little shifts and the aha moment for you?
Yeah, so my story just real quick, I was in marketing at, Fortune 50 company, big company, had the dream job. Everybody, and I loved my job. I loved my company. I loved the people I worked with, but I had just been doing it for so long. And I just remember I was at, a conference at a big party, a big fun party. We always had fun parties. And I just remember looking around. I put my glass of wine down. I said, I'm going back to my hotel room. I just can't do it anymore. It was like literally something came over me and just said, you're kind of done. And so I knew that. But yet I still struggled and I stayed in marketing. I tried to change companies and industries to get me going. None of that worked. So finally, I had to make the decision where I'm done. And that's just that decision alone saying I'm changing is hard. So I get it.
Mhm.
Took me a long time to do it. If I can help other women do it faster, that's my goal.
Yes.
Um, and then it was all about just all of those internal questions on who I want to be next. And so I think it's important that you take the time to do it. Um, and know that, yeah, like you said, we are still growing. I was talking to a woman, she's in her 90s and she's still traveling and working and like creating
Wow.
amazing stuff. And I was just like, yeah, you know what? We are still growing. We have a long way to go and we might as well do the best with the next how many, decades we have in front of us and make sure we're enjoying them. So, yeah, my aha moment was just kind of realizing, it was just not fitting. There was like a pit in my stomach, like I'm sure a lot of women get, Sunday evening creepies when you got to go to work the next day. And these are all signs. And you just need to start paying attention to the signs, and not ignore them like I did for so long.
And
So,
being honest with
yeah,
yourself.
Yeah.
I'm very, very blessed to have an amazing husband who's very supportive. But the day that I actually had a heart to heart with him, and from his perspective, I know there's no other human being in this world that loves me like he does, really was a turning point for me too. And
Yeah.
so that's another suggestion that I would have for listeners is talk to the people that love you, that you're safe with.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
what do you bring to the table? Because the
Yeah.
reality of it is we all have a purpose in life.
Yeah.
Every single human being, there's been billions of people walk on this planet, and there will be many more to come. And not one human being has the same light that you have and the ability to reach the people that you do. So if we don't take the time to truly understand what our purpose is and that
Mhm.
our life reflects and aligns with our purpose, then it's
Yeah.
going to be harder. And for me personally, it was, and I can feel it, like, when you're on the right track, how it feels, and being mindful, connecting to your body. What's your body telling you? Is your heart rate beating faster? Or how's your breath? And it was these little things that you would have asked me 5 years ago. I would have laughed at you and told you to put on your big girl panties. This is how it goes. And that's probably why I was in burnout.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, I think a lot of us we get stuck with the fear of making a change. And
That's
sometimes
good.
you just have to look fear in the eye and just say, I'm going. I mean, I remember I struggled through that. I'm like, oh, what are people gonna think? I'm completely changing, what I do for a living. I'm not that executive anymore. People are just gonna look down on me. And I was so concerned with what other people were thinking, and it took me a long time to get over that. I mean, I stalled and stalled and like stopped myself from launching, my new career for the longest time. And then finally I was at my computer one day. I'm like, what am I doing? Why am I caring what other people think? I'm just going for it. And like in
And
that
look at
day,
it.
I'm like, I'm doing it. So you have to just kind of step into the fear, get comfortable with, change and just try it.
You just brought something up that's very much aligned with my comeback journey, and that was facing fear.
Yeah.
Choosing to finally face what you've been avoiding for
Hmm.
probably most of your life. But then the next step for me personally was understanding where that fear came from and why. And a lot of the times, and I don't know if you're going to disagree with me on this, but many of the times it's from your formative years or your childhood, previous traumas that have shaped you. Many of our personality traits, or what we like to call them, are actually trauma responses of what happened and how we thought we had to show up now for this world. And then we lived a life, decades of this trauma response, our personalities, and developed these coping mechanisms. And then you realize that a lot of your fears, and this is, I'm speaking for myself, I realized a lot of my fears were stemmed from when I was younger, and the imposter syndrome, the lies that I was telling myself to this day. And when I faced those fears head on, and I'm still on the journey, don't get me wrong, that is when I saw a lot of the change happen. But I had to actually identify them. I wrote them down, and I wrote down my limiting belief under them. And I look back to them. And it's really neat when you can look back at that and see the progress, right?
Yeah, good for you for doing that and identifying it. Yeah. I mean that can be it for people, or it's self-inflicted. I know for
Yeah.
me, it was just kind of self-inflicted. I was a perfectionist. I wanted to do everything and never fail, and I was afraid to fail, and I did that to myself, all those thoughts. Um and then you just, get to the point where you're like, this is my life. I'm just going to do what I want to do, and not worry about failing or anybody else. And I think confidence comes from doing. Like,
Yes.
you have to take action before you build the confidence. It doesn't just show up.
Yeah.
So it takes stepping into the fear, trying things out. What's the worst that could happen? Try things out, and then as you do something over and over again, then you start to build your confidence. And I think some people feel it's the other way around, that, oh, you're just born with it, but you're not.
That is
You got to exercise it.
that is so true. And
Yeah.
another good strategy that you just mentioned was writing down what's the worst thing that can happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Write it down. What is the absolute worst thing that can happen? And then have the outcome of that and what you're going to do about it. Because once
Yeah.
your brain realizes, okay, well, that's the worst that can happen. I already have a plan.
Yeah.
I have nothing to lose.
Yeah. And what's the best thing that could happen? Look
And
at the
there you go.
positive, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. No, that actually probably would be the starting point, is what's the best thing that can happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's this brain navigating to the worst.
Yeah.
My apologies. But let's talk about that paralysis, because we all have it. It's
Mhm.
happened to every one of us. That fear sets in, it consumes us, and we don't even know what step to do to take, to move forward.
Yeah.
What is one thing that you would start with when, for our listeners, that would help them out with that?
Yeah, well, and I think that's where it helps to talk to people. So whether it's a friend, a coach, a spouse, if you can talk and get your fears out there and what's holding you back, I think you can kind of step outside. Once it's out there, you can step outside of yourself really and look back, look inward and
Mhm.
think, it's not so bad. Why aren't I willing to just give it a try? But I think it does. It takes talking to other people, having other people hold you accountable to going and trying things.
Mhm.
Sometimes if you do it by yourself, you just keep pushing it off and pushing it off. But if you have someone that can hold you accountable, I think that's a super, resource that you should take advantage of.
That is so true. We tend to hide our challenges and try to do things alone because we're embarrassed of what it might look like, back to caring what other people think. But
Hmm.
it's very important to have that, that support for sure.
Yeah.
And then, in my opinion, small steps is what gets you through here, like the
Yeah.
micro bravery. Every single time you succeed at something, those new pathways are being formed, and your brain will navigate back to that opposed to the negative. What are
Hmm.
some, you mentioned it, action creates confidence, but what are other little
Yeah.
steps maybe that you can think of that could help someone with this?
Yeah. And you're so right with the micro, actions. It's actually that the number one way to make a midlife change is through micro consistent actions. So I think whenever you can do kind of back to the habits of trying to try out things that you want to do and do them over and over again, create a habit loop for yourself and doing them consistently. And again, it doesn't have to be anything big. Like I said, I was coaching that teacher and she just wrote stuff every night. Not a lot. She just wrote every night until the point where she looked back and realized, wow, I didn't realize these little writing assignments you gave me were adding up. And that when I looked back, she's putting these writings on Substack and getting, a following, and she'll monetize it eventually. But it doesn't happen overnight. So you have to give yourself patience to know that you can do these little micro steps consistently, and that's where the change happens.
It really does.
Yeah.
Another one for me is community. I
Mhm.
can't believe the difference in this journey with the
Mhm.
sisterhood and the mentors, and, like you said, accountability on the journey is
Yeah.
so important. And we have it at our fingertips.
Yeah.
There's so many support groups, so many community groups that you can reach out to. And if you're embarrassed and for some reason you don't want to tell your people closest to you, join another group. Get, you know, feedback from what other people have done, what's worked for them, what
Yeah.
may not have worked for them. It really does help. Validation is what I'm getting
Yeah.
to.
Yep.
Yeah.
Very true. Yeah.
All right. So I want to give people some actionable steps. What are, when if a woman is feeling this, and this need for a transition, we talked about the very first step, being aware. What are other steps that we can take that can help them out?
Yeah, I mean, definitely being aware is first. I think writing down, who is it you want to be at this stage of life, and really, I mean, look at what do you want your surroundings to be like? Do you want to go back and try a new career and be in an office somewhere? Do you want to try being I don't know, on a board of a nonprofit and try that? Do you want to go back to school? I think it's writing down everything that interests you and then seeing, what skills you have or skills you'd like to develop. that can get you there. Again, it all it comes back to envisioning it and then creating the path to get there. And I think creating the path to get there is the easy part. It's
right?
the visioning, it's
Yeah.
the mind work and the internal and writing it down and getting it out and seeing what really makes you happy. And who do you want to be around every day? What kinds of people? Surround yourself by people that are positive. And maybe disengage a little from those friends that are negative, and aren't supporting you. I think, like you said, community is important, and that means everybody in your circle. Find people that are supportive of you. So I think, just writing things down that you want to do, asking yourself some really important questions. And I have resources. I think you'll probably link to my website, but there are resources there of questions that you can start with. That just starts to put you on the path because, like I said, it's not easy and it doesn't happen overnight, and it takes a lot of self-reflection to get you started.
And when we talked about this earlier about being intentional, you
Mhm.
have to block out time for yourself. You need to give yourself grace. And the go, go, go mentality just does not work when you're in my opinion, at a
Mhm.
stage in life like this, when you're trying to reinvent yourself and essentially.
Yeah.
But block schedule, in your
Mhm.
mornings, hold that time frame close to your heart and don't let anybody take it. And in that
Mhm.
time frame, the consistency of showing up for you for the first time in your life,
Mhm.
right? Most of the
Yeah.
time it is.
Yeah.
And being, like you said, consistent with that. Another thing for me, you're bringing up all these memories of what I've done, but saying it out loud,
Mhm.
like looking
Yep.
in the mirror. How often do you look yourself in the eyes and say that? When was the last time you told yourself you loved yourself? That
Mhm.
you were proud of yourself, that you gave yourself a little bit of grace and realized that you're human, and any transition in life is difficult. And, it's really important to understand that if you're not showing up for you and able to love yourself, it's going to be really hard for the people around you to show up the way that you need them to.
Yeah. Yeah. And my best ideas come when I'm just out for a walk. So,
Mm.
maybe take your dog for a walk or whatever, but getting out in nature and away from people and away from stresses for, 15, 20 minutes. Just that alone can do wonders.
Somatic coaching, and that's honestly why I'm diving into that world now and getting some certifications in that, because the mind body connection, the reason for why I named my company Healthy Mind, Healthy
Mhm.
Body, is because if you don't have a healthy mind, your body will follow, and vice
Yeah.
versa.
Yeah.
And a good way to really get deep into some of your thoughts is simply moving your body. Our
Yep.
bodies were created to move, not to stay stagnant, and you will notice a big difference. If
Yeah.
you have that anxiety coming on, and those racing thoughts, just put your shoes on, go for a walk, overanalyze it while you're walking,
Yeah.
you'll feel
Exactly.
better.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. You are a wealth of information. I'm going to be posting all of your details in the show notes, but why don't you take a moment here and just let the listeners know how can they reach you, what services that you offer, high level, and any closing messages.
Yeah, yeah. So thank you. Yeah, so my company, as you said before, is Purposeful Pivot. So you can visit my website at purposefulpivot.net, or email me at kellyg@purposefulpivot.net. Also, you can find me on LinkedIn. I have a LinkedIn group where, we discuss these issues in a forum that's on a private group so we can kind of talk through things. Um, but yeah, my parting thoughts here are really just, don't beat yourself up. You're not the only one going through this. We're all going through this together. More and more women, every time I talk to them, are thinking the same way. And that, like I said, you worked your whole life to get to this point where you're free to make your own choices and decide where you want your next stage to be. So stay positive, and you'll get there.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, midlife isn't the end of your story. It's the opening chapter of your comeback. And every comeback starts with the moment that you decide and you choose to rise again. If today's conversation stirred something in you, take it as a sign. Your comeback season doesn't wait for the perfect time, it never will. It starts with you choosing that one brave step today. And if you loved this episode, share it with a friend who's ready for her own comeback. For more tools, encouragement, and sisterhood, check out the show notes and let's connect. Until next time, my friends. Thank you for joining us on the comeback season. Please remember, the conversations we share here are for informational and motivational purposes only. We are not licensed medical professionals, and this podcast is not intended to diagnose, treat, or replace guidance from your doctor or your healthcare provider. Always consult your healthcare team before making changes to your nutrition, your fitness, or your mental health routines. Your health and well-being comes first, and we want you to move forward safely with the right support for your journey.